Hi, today we're going to be looking at the various Chinese inventions and discoveries during the medieval period. This page, we probably don't need to write anything down, but we're going to be focusing between the years 200 and 1400 CE, mostly, with a few exceptions. But as we've gone through the year, we're realizing that this Eurocentric thought that Europe was the leader and head of everything isn't entirely accurate. As we looked at the Middle East, Africa, Mesoamerica, and now China, we see that there are going to be many places, such as engineering, mathematics, medicine, that the inventions in China are going to far surpass what's going on in Europe. Fortunately, though, through cultural diffusion, we're going to see these things coming to the rest of the world. So, let's start looking at our exploration and travel, which, by the way, now you need to please start writing. Now, the first invention is going to be slightly out of our time frame, but it's going to be the compass, which was invented around 3 BCE. Now, the compass is going to be incredibly important because it lets you know which way you're going. Because if you're going out to sea and there's water in front of you, behind you, to the left and to the right, it's very hard to get your bearings. Now, you might be saying, oh, well, what about the sun? Well, then my response is, what about on a cloudy day? So the compass is going to let you know what direction you're going. The next big innovation that the Chinese are going to develop in sea travel is going to be watertight ship compartments. Before this, no matter how well you made your ships, there was still always going to be some water coming in. Now, that's fine for a short trip when you only have a little bit of water, but if you're going for a long distance journey and you keep on filling up with water, that is going to become a problem very quickly. Now, besides sea travel, we're going to see innovations going in more local kind of travel, such as the paddle wheel boat, which you can see over here in the top right. These are just like the paddle wheel boats you might be riding at Baker Park, although this looks a little different, I know. Now, that's going to make it going faster, having pedals like a bicycle than having to row with your arms. Another important innovation is going to be the canal, which has allowed the Chinese to have canals, which we've talked about before, man-made rivers essentially, but to raise and lower the water levels. Because if you are going and just going by the current, you're essentially going downstream. But the problem is if you want to go upstream. The canal lock makes it so that the water levels can be raised and lowered so that you can be going up or downstream, whichever way you need to go. And another huge innovation is going to be the segmented arch bridge. Now, we've seen the ones that the Romans have done last year, where we see it looks like many U's stacked up to each other. Now, the segmented arch that we see right here on the bottom right, as I've mentioned, is going to be different because instead of going boom, 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 I hope you can see this mouse, it just has one long arch with another arch supporting it, and then four other arches to put it together. This is a lot less materials than the Roman method, and is going to wind up actually being stronger. So you use less material, so it costs less, and it's a strong bridge. Awesome. Now, another huge innovation is going to be the invention of paper in 2 CE. This is going to predate the Europeans by over 1,000 years, the awesome invention of paper. But besides inventing paper early, the Chinese are going to figure out things to do with that paper. First, we have wood block printing, which is essentially the same as using a stamp. You have something carved into wood, you put it into ink, put it on the paper, bada bing, bada boom. Now, this is going to be improved even further by the creation of movable type. Now, what that does is instead of going and having to have your whole entire book page carved out, and you can only do that one book page, they're going to have the different characters carved into the wood. So therefore, you can mix and match. And you can see over in this picture on the top right how these little cubes are going to be able to be switched around in order to have the words and ideas go into different places. Now, another huge invention that the Chinese are going to become very famous for during this period is porcelain. Now, porcelain is a fine pottery that is going to basically be used for very fancy dishes, also toilets. Now, this is going to be something that Europe is going to take a long time to figure out how to make, not until the 1800s, because it requires very, very, very high temperatures. The Chinese had something called the blast furnace, which is going to go make things super hot, which is going to make it possible for. And so, if you've ever been at your parents' or maybe your grandparents' house, and they call those plates china, it's because it's porcelain. And for most of history, China was the only place to get those really, really nice plates. Now, because they also had the blast furnace, we're going to see that the Chinese are also going to be the first groups of people to create steel. And steel is going to be a very, very, very strong alloy of metal, iron and carbon, to be able to make things that are very, very sharp, very, very strong. We just talked about steel when we talked about our Latin America unit with one of the advantages the Spanish had over the Inca. Now, military technology is going to be another huge place for the Chinese to innovate. One of the first things will be the crossbow. Now, a crossbow is going to be very important. The crossbow is going to wind up having more power than a standard bow and arrow typically, and is also able to be used by almost anyone. A bow takes some skill. Crossbow takes less skill. You just point, shoot, put another bolt in. The biggest innovation, however, that the Chinese are going to go and develop in military technology is going to be gunpowder, which is going to completely change how wars are fought. Now, the first weapon that they go and use gunpowder for is actually going to be an early flamethrower. They're going to mix this gunpowder with oil, have a flame, and then they're going to wind up spreading that on enemies. But we see in the picture over here to in the mid, we're going to see ancient hand grenades. We're going to see these clay jars filled with gunpowder put with a fuse, something that's going to be very terrifying on the battlefield. The rocket launcher is going to be Chinese. They would shoot rockets that would go make loud noises and or explode, which would go and create fear and panic in the enemy. You have to realize people had never seen things like this before. So therefore, the first time they come in contact with it is going to be very, very scary. You know, they'll think it's like magic with these explosions. They even had rocket launchers that would fire over 100 rockets at one time. I'll show you a little video of it later on. Now, with the rocket launchers, they primarily weren't used to go blow up the enemy, but it's going to be creating fireworks, something that we all enjoy every year for the 4th of July. We're going to see those being created by the Chinese. Now, there are a few everyday objects that you might have even today that are going to be invented by the Chinese. Playing cards. Now, the original Chinese playing cards are going to be very different from what we have today. The shapes aren't going to be completely uniform. They're going to be created by famous people, and they're going to be very, very thick. But they'd play some similar games to us today. If any of you have played Hanafuna, which is actually a Japanese game, it's going to be similar to these kind of cards as opposed to the cards that we have. Now, something that we all hopefully have had money. Now, you just learned about how they ran out of copper because of the increase in trade, so therefore they invented the use of paper money. You see paper money pictured here. And another huge invention is the mechanical clock. Now, the Chinese are going to be the first to develop it, and we see it pictured on the bottom right here. Now, I absolutely love this picture because this mechanical clock is absolutely huge. Now, it was developed by water dripping down onto a series of cups, and those cups, because the water is going to weigh it down, is going to make it rotate, and that's going to spin all sorts of little things. Now, what I love about it too is we can see the scale it is to people. This is a person standing right by that clock, and we can see it is several persons tall. We have a person up here going inside of the whole thing, a person on the climbing this ladder here. These were humongous. And it was really neat though, because it had drums and bells that would go and chime. So you would be able to know and hear what time it is, just like that big clock in Baker Park. Finally, we're going to get to disease prevention. Now, this is going to be very important because China has had a huge population and they wanted to keep their population healthy. Now, one of the things that they would do is if they saw someone getting sick, so let's say Alexis gets sick of an infectious disease and dies. Before they go into her home, what they're going to do is they're going to burn off smoke that they thought would go and make the spirits go away that killed the poor Alexis. And what happened though, this was actually chlorine gas that they were burning, and the smoke is a disinfectant. It did kill the germs. Now, another thing that they would do. So say Anna is getting sick a lot. What they would do is they would go and steam Anna's clothes so to hopefully make her feel better. And of course, what we know now is very hot temperatures kill germs. So therefore, even though they're doing something that they think has to do with the spiritual, with the spirits, it winds up going and being effective. Now, here is the biggest thing: inoculation. Now, inoculation is the same thing that you do when you go to the doctors and get a shot, essentially, to protect you against diseases. The way inoculating works is you get exposed to a small amount of the disease, something that is dead and won't actually hurt you. But what your immune system is, it sees it, it learns what to do against it. So, what they would do is they would go and have some smallpox pus or smallpox scabs. And they would go take Ben. They would take off his smallpox scabs. And poor Ben is not going to make it, sorry. But they're then going to grind it up. So our doctor, Austin, is going to go grind up those scabs. And he's going to make it into a fine powder. So then, when Lauren says she's not feeling well, she goes to Doctor and Austin, and he goes, makes a tea out of that scab dust. Lauren drinks it. It's probably super gross, but now her body is exposed to those smallpox germs, even though it's not going to hurt her, but winds up making her immune. And just like I said, this is the same as when you get a vaccine or when you get a flu shot. You are introduced to a germ and then you are able to go and fight it.